Millionaire catches black cleaner studying in the dark. What happens next surprises everyone. "What the hell are you doing here?" Richard Sterling's sharp voice echoed through the empty penthouse at 3 in the morning, causing the 26-year-old woman to look up from the books scattered across the marble floor. Kesha Williams remained seated with a disturbing calm, her small flashlight illuminating pages of advanced calculus. Around her, cleaning supplies and organized rags showed that she had finished her shift. But there he was, studying math as if that $30 million penthouse was his private library. "Mr. Sterling," she replied in a controlled voice that made something stir in the millionaire's chest. "I'm done cleaning. I was just taking a moment to study before heading home." Richard descended the marble stairs with heavy steps, his silk pajamas contrasting brutally with a cleaning lady's simple uniform. At 42, he had built a real estate empire by being ruthless to those who didn't know their place. And a cleaning lady studying in his home definitely didn't know her. "Study?" He laughed contemptuously. "Do you have any idea where you are? This isn't a public library. It's my home and I pay you to clean, not to play student." Kesha slowly closed the book, putting away the $5 calculator she had bought at a convenience store. There was something hypnotic about the way she moved. Unhurried, unafraid, like someone who had weathered far worse storms and survived. "With all due respect, sir, I finished all the work. The house is spotless just as I always leave it." Her response only angered Richard more. For 6 months, Kesha had been invisible to him, just another employee who showed up, cleaned, and disappeared. But finding her there with college books, studying advanced calculus as if she had the right to dream beyond her station, stirred something primitive in his mind. "Listen carefully," he said, leaning closer, trying to intimidate her with his height. "People like you have a place in society. Don't pretend to be something you're not. It's pathetic." That's when something changed in Kesha's eyes. For a moment, Richard saw a glint that made him take an involuntary step back. It wasn't anger. It was something much more dangerous. It was the quiet certainty of someone who holds a secret too powerful to be revealed before the time is right. "People like me," she repeated slowly, savoring each word. "Interesting perspective, Mr. Sterling." During those 6 months working in the penthouse, Kesha had been more observant than Richard had imagined. She had overheard business conversations, seen documents left on the desk, witnessed meetings where dubious deals were struck. Information that an arrogant millionaire would never expect a mere cleaning lady to be able to understand, or more importantly, methodically file away. "You're fired," Richard declared with calculated coldness. "You can pick up your things and leave, and don't even think about asking for references." Kesha stood up slowly, gathering her books with the same dignity with which she had opened them. When she reached the door, she stopped and turned to Richard with that same enigmatic smile that had disturbed him minutes earlier. "Mr. Sterling," she said in a voice that echoed off the marble walls. "Have you ever heard the saying about not underestimating those who are always watching?" The question hung in the air like a veiled promise as Kesha walked out of the penthouse carrying not only her books, but 6 months of meticulous observations about a man who had just made the biggest mistake of his life. There, facing that look of contempt that he knew so well, she stood her ground like someone guarding information too explosive to be revealed before the right moment. Because Kesha wasn't just a talented cleaning lady being wronged. She was an economics student who had graduated summa cum laude and had spent half a year gathering evidence of illegal practices that Richard didn't even know she was capable of understanding. If this story of prejudice and underestimation touched his heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to find out how a simple moment of discrimination would become the catalyst for an epic downfall that would change both their lives forever. The next morning, Richard Sterling woke up with a strange feeling of irritation that he couldn't explain. The scene from the previous night continued to hammer in his head. Not the cleaning lady's insubordination, which he was used to dealing with, but that look, that damn calmness she showed as if she knew something he didn't. "Ridiculous," he muttered to himself, adjusting his 1,000 Italian tie. "A cleaning lady trying to intimidate me." But his irritation only grew when his personal assistant, Janet, appeared in his office with a worried expression. "Mr. Sterling, the cleaning company called. They want to know why Kesha Williams was fired. Apparently, she was the highest-rated employee they've ever had." "Reason?" Richard laughed contemptuously. "She didn't know her place. I found that woman studying in my home as if it were a public library. Unacceptable." Janet hesitated. "Sir, may I ask what kind of material she was studying?" I don't care if it was a gossip magazine or an instruction manual. Richard slammed his hand on the desk. Domestic employees do not study in their employers' homes. Period. What Richard didn't know was that while he was getting angry in his luxurious office, Kesha was at the small neighborhood public library, not crying or lamenting as he imagined, but doing something much more dangerous, organizing 6 months of information she had meticulously collected. During her 6 months working in the penthouse, Kesha had developed a routine that went unnoticed. She always arrived 40 minutes early, not out of excessive dedication, but because she had discovered that Richard had a habit of leaving important documents scattered around the house after evening meetings with partners and investors. Land purchase contracts in areas that would be valued by insider information, obtained through contacts at City Hall, bribery agreements disguised as consulting fees to obtain building permits in record time, text messages coordinating price manipulation at public auctions with other businessmen in the industry. Kesha didn't just see this information. It was her who discreetly photographed it with an old cell phone that no one would suspect had a camera good enough to document evidence. Her economics degree from State University, where she graduated summa cum laude while working 3 jobs to support herself, had given her not only the technical knowledge to understand complex financial schemes, but also the iron discipline necessary to execute long-term plans. Her diploma was tucked away in a drawer in the small house she shared with her mother and 2 younger sisters. For 2 years after graduation, Kesha sent resumes to every major financial consulting firm in the city. She received only 3 responses, all polite rejections that mentioned profile not a good fit for the company culture. That's when she decided to change her strategy. If he couldn't get in through the front door of the world of corrupt millionaires, he would go in through the back. Literally getting a job as a cleaner at the cleaning company that served the city's most luxurious homes was no coincidence. It was planning. Kesha spent weeks studying hiring patterns, schedules, and the homes served. When she learned that Richard Sterling needed a new cleaner, she applied for the job that same day. "Do you have references?" asked the cleaning company supervisor. "I have something better," Kesha replied with that same enigmatic smile that would haunt Richard months later. "I need to work hard." For 6 months, she was invisible to Richard exactly as she had planned. She would arrive, clean perfectly, gather information, and leave without being noticed until she decided she had enough material and needed an excuse to be fired without raising suspicion about her true intentions. Studying advanced calculus in the penthouse wasn't carelessness, it was bait. She knew Richard would be home at that time because she had studied her religious Thursday routine. When he returned early from business dinners at the club, she knew he would react exactly as he did, with arrogance and prejudice. Now at the public library, Kesha opened a used laptop she had bought with her savings and began organizing the most explosive dossier the local high society had ever seen. Not just evidence of corruption, but a complete mapping of how Richard Sterling had built his $30 million empire on a foundation of kickbacks, insider information, and manipulation of public tenders. His cell phone vibrated. A message from her younger sister Jennifer, only 16. "Kush, did you get another job? Mom's worried about this month's bills." Kesha looked at the screen, then at the dozens of documents organized in front of her. For years her family had sacrificed everything so she could study. Her mother, Barbara, worked double shifts as a nurse at a public hospital. Jennifer and Tracy, 18, shared a part-time job at a diner to help with the expenses. They deserved better than the life of deprivation they led. They deserved justice. And Richard Sterling, who had built her fortune by trampling on people like her, was about to find out that he had underestimated the wrong person. "Tell Mom not to worry," Kesha typed back. "Soon our situation will change completely." What Richard Sterling couldn't imagine, as he bragged to his partners about having put an insolent employee in her place, was that every act of contempt had been carefully documented and catalogued by someone who not only had the evidence of his crimes, but also the academic background necessary to understand exactly how to use that information to destroy his empire brick by brick. Each new humiliation only strengthened something inside Kesha that privileged men like Richard couldn't see. A silent force fueled by the very injustice they sought to impose, methodically building the sentence of those who believed themselves to be above the consequences of his actions. 3 weeks after her dismissal, financial reality hit the Williams family like a hurricane. Kesha's last paycheck had been used to buy high blood pressure medication for his mother, Barbara, and now there was only $43 left in her wallet. Kush, did you get anything today? Asked Jennifer, arriving home after another double shift at the diner. At 16, she had taken on responsibilities that no teenager should have to bear. I'm still looking. Kesha lied, quickly closing the notebook where she had organized the evidence against Richard. She couldn't tell her family about his real plan. They wouldn't understand why she was turning down cleaning jobs that came her way, waiting for the right moment to strike. Meanwhile, Richard Sterling was living his best life. At the exclusive golf club where he met his members every Thursday, he told the story of the insolent cleaning lady as if it were a private joke. You won't believe it, he laughed, gesturing with his $300 whiskey glass. I found that woman studying calculus in my living room. Calculus? As if a cleaning lady could understand advanced math. Marcus Thompson, a young investigative journalist who worked part-time as a waiter at the club to pay for college, had heard everything. Marcus knew the world of corrupt power brokers well. He had grown up in the same inner-city neighborhood as Kesha, earned a scholarship through hard work, and now specialized in exposing money-laundering schemes among the business elite. The next morning, he found Kesha at the public library. Sorry to bother you, he said cautiously as he approached the table where she was working. My name is Marcus Thompson. I'm a journalist. I heard you used to work for Richard Sterling. Kesha looked up, sizing up the young man in front of her. Something about his posture, the way he spoke, suggested he wasn't just another curious onlooker. I did. Why? Because I've been investigating him for 2 years and I've never been able to get close enough to obtain solid evidence. Marcus sat down, lowering his voice. But someone who worked inside his house for months. It was then that Kesha realized she had found exactly what she needed. Not just someone with access to the media, but someone who already knew Richard's methods and had the necessary contacts to turn evidence into real consequences. What kind of evidence does he need? She asked, opening her notebook in front of someone else for the first time. Marcus's eyes widened at the meticulous organization of the documents, fraudulent contracts, records of suspicious payments, coordination of schemes with other businessmen, all cataloged by date, amount, and participants involved. My God, he whispered. This is enough to take down not just Sterling, but half the businessmen in this city. I'm not done yet. Kesha replied with that enigmatic smile that had haunted Richard weeks earlier. I have 3 more contacts who've confirmed information about fraudulent bids at City Hall. Over the next few weeks, while Kesha continued to pretend to look for a job to reassure her family, she and her worked together to build an irrefutable dossier. Every document was verified, every transaction traced, every participant in the scheme identified. Richard, completely oblivious to what was coming, made his biggest mistake yet. During a meeting with investors in his penthouse, the same one where he had humiliated her, he was filmed by a security camera offering bribes in exchange for inside information on a public housing project. The irony was delicious. The same man who had looked down on Kesha for studying was being recorded while conspiring to divert funds intended for people just like her. We got it, Marcus said, showing Kesha the recording. With this, plus the documents you collected, we have enough material for a series of reports that will shake the entire power structure of the city. Kesha stared at the screen, watching Richard gesticulate arrogantly as he explained how to manipulate public contracts. For a moment, she felt an almost physical satisfaction, imagining her expression when he discovered he had been defeated by the inept cleaning lady he had so despised. When do we publish? She asked. Next Monday. Front page of the newspaper, main website, simultaneous social media posts. Marcus smiled. It'll be impossible to cover up or downplay. That night, Kesha arrived home to find her mother waiting in the living room with that look only mothers have when they know something important is happening. My daughter, you've been different, calmer, more determined. What are you planning? Kesha hugged Barbara, smelling the familiar scent of hospital disinfectant that always accompanied her mother after double shifts. Mom, remember when you said that one day our situation would change? I remember that day has come. On Monday, the world will know who I really am. Barbara held her daughter's face in her hands, seeing something in Kesha's eyes that made her smile for the first time in weeks. It was the same iron determination that had led the girl from the slums to graduate summa cum, while working 3 jobs. What has he done, Kesha? Justice, Mama. Just justice. While Richard Sterling slept peacefully in his $30 million penthouse, completely convinced that he had put an end to the problem of the insolent cleaning lady, Kesha Williams was putting the finishing touches on a revenge that would redefine not only their lives, but the entire power structure that men like he used to crush people like her. What that privileged man couldn't imagine was that every act of contempt had been carefully documented by someone who not only had the evidence of his crimes, but also the academic background necessary to orchestrate her downfall in such a meticulous way that it would be impossible to escape the consequences. Monday, 6:00 in the morning, Richard Sterling woke up to the insistent ringing of his cell phone. First, it was his personal assistant, then the company lawyer, followed by 3 different journalists all talking at once about explosive reports and front page. "What the hell are you talking about?" Richard shouted into the phone, still in his pajamas, walking into the penthouse living room where he usually had breakfast while admiring the privileged view of the city. That's when he saw it. Her own photo was splashed across the front page of the region's largest newspaper next to the headline in bold letters, "Millionaire Empire Built on Bribes and Fraud. Exclusive Documents Reveal Corruption Scheme." Richard felt his legs buckle. He picked up the newspaper with trembling hands and began to read. Each paragraph was a stab in the heart. Fraudulent contracts that he was sure no one had seen, text messages coordinating bribes that he had deleted, recordings of conversations that had taken place in supposedly safe locations. "Impossible," he muttered, frantically turning the pages. How did they get this? Marcus Thompson's report was a masterpiece of investigative journalism. Each accusation was accompanied by documents, photos, bank records, a complete map of how Richard had turned bribes into assets, insider information into competitive advantage, manipulation into an empire. But it was at the end of the second page that Richard felt the world completely collapse. A photo of her offering a bribe in her own penthouse with the exact date and time. Below the caption that made his blood run cold, "Evidence provided by an anonymous source who had privileged access to the businessman's residence for months." Anonymous source with privileged access. He repeated aloud, beginning to connect the dots. Months of access. His cell phone rang again. This time it was the president of the bank where she kept her main accounts. "Richard, we need to talk urgently. The federal auditors are already here." Before he could respond, another call came in. The mayor panicked. "Sterling, you've compromised me. I need to publicly distance myself from you immediately." One after another, all the contacts who had built his empire began to cut ties. Investors demanded their money back. Partners declared themselves victims of manipulation. Authorities announced criminal investigations. At 9 in the morning, Richard was locked in his penthouse office watching his life fall apart in real time on television. Anchors discussed his crimes as if they were facts. Experts calculated the years he would face in prison. Her bank accounts had been frozen as a precaution. That's when the doorbell rang. "Mr. Sterling," a familiar female voice echoed through the intercom. "It's Kesha Williams. I'm here to return something you left behind." Richard felt the air rush out of his lungs. Kesha, the cleaning lady he had humiliated and fired, the woman he had called incompetent, who he had treated as inferior, who he had completely underestimated. With trembling fingers, he pressed the button to let her in. 5 minutes later, she stood before him, wearing a simple blazer but carrying a leather briefcase that he recognized immediately. It was identical to the ones his lawyers used. "I came to deliver this in person," Kesha said, placing a copy of the newspaper with her photo on the front page on the desk. "I thought you might like an autographed copy." Richard watched her, trying to process the transformation, the straight posture, the direct gaze, the confidence radiating from her every movement. How had he not realized that this woman was much more than she appeared? It was he, much more than she appeared. It was he, she whispered. He gathered all this information. For 6 months, Mr. Sterling, every time you left documents lying around the house, thinking that a simple cleaning lady wouldn't be able to understand complex financial contracts or recognize evidence of money laundering. Reality hit Richard like a tsunami. His degree is in economics, summa cum laude State University. Kesha smiled, the same enigmatic smile that had disturbed him weeks earlier. But now he understood its true meaning. Ironic, isn't it? You fired me for studying calculus, not knowing that I had already graduated in a field that allowed me to understand every one of his criminal schemes perfectly. Richard collapsed into his chair, finally understanding the magnitude of his arrogance. Why did you do that? Because men like her build empires by trampling on people like me and my family. Because you believe your position makes you untouchable. Kesha leaned forward slightly, speaking with an icy calm that made Richard cringe, but mainly because you made the fatal mistake of underestimating my intelligence based solely on my skin color and social status. Richard's cell phone rang again. This time it was his own lawyer. "Richard, the IRS is confiscating all your assets. You need to turn yourself in voluntarily before they issue an arrest warrant." Kesha watched Richard receive the news, saw the exact moment when he realized he had lost absolutely everything: his fortune, his reputation, his freedom. All because of the inept cleaning lady he had despised. "There's one last thing, Mr. Sterling," she said, walking toward the door. "My family no longer has to worry about financial hardship. The reward I received for cooperating with the investigation was generous enough to ensure that my mother can retire. My sisters can finish college, and I can finally work in the field I studied so hard for." Richard looked up, seeing Kesha standing in the doorway of the penthouse where she had been humiliated weeks earlier. "You planned all of this from the beginning." "No, Mr. Sterling. I just prepared myself for the right opportunity. And she, with her arrogance and prejudice, gave me exactly what I needed to turn 6 months of careful observation into the evidence necessary to bring down his empire of lies." As Richard Sterling faced the prospect of decades in prison and the total loss of everything he had worked for, Kesha Williams walked through the city with a quiet certainty of someone who had proven that intelligence and determination always defeat arrogance and prejudice, even when the battle seems impossible to win from the start. 6 months later, Richard Sterling sat in a federal prison cell wearing an orange jumpsuit that contrasted starkly with the $3,000 suits he used to wear. Her sentence: 15 years for racketeering, money laundering, and active corruption. The $30 million empire had been completely dismantled, properties auctioned off, bank accounts seized, investments lost. The man who once looked down on a cleaning lady for not knowing his place now shared his space with criminals who treated him exactly as he had treated Kesha, as someone inferior. Meanwhile, Kesha Williams was on her first day as a senior analyst at the largest financial consulting firm in the city. His office with a panoramic view was in the same building where Richard used to close his corrupt deals. But now she occupied a position 3 floors above what he had ever achieved. "Congratulations on the compliance report, Kesha," said his supervisor, Dr. Martinez. Her analysis prevented the company from getting into a scheme similar to Sterling's. "You saved our reputation." The professional recognition was gratifying, but what really warmed Kesha's heart was seeing her family thrive. Her mother, Barbara, had retired from the hospital and now spent her days tending to a small garden at the new house they had bought. Jennifer was in medical school, supported by the scholarship Kesha had secured through her professional contacts. Tracy was studying law, inspired by her older sister's story. "Kush, did you see this?" Jennifer came home a newspaper. The headline showed Richard being transferred to a maximum security prison after a fight with other inmates. "The guy who humiliated his girlfriend isn't doing well in jail." Kesha looked at the photo without feeling satisfaction or pity. "He brought this on himself, Jen. I just documented it." The real transformation was not only in Kesha's life, but in how her story inspired others. Marcus Thompson had won an investigative journalism award for his series on corporate corruption, and now ran a foundation that helped young people from the inner city report injustices in the corporate world. During a lecture at the university where she graduated, Kesha told her story to 500 economic students. "When that man told me that people like me had a place in society, he was right," she said, eliciting laughter from the audience. "Our place is where our competence and determination take us, not where prejudice tries to confine us." A student raised his hand. "How did you stay calm during the 6 months you were gathering evidence?" "Because I learned that anger without strategy is just noise, but anger with planning becomes justice." Richard, watching Kesha's interview on the prison television, finally understood the magnitude of his arrogance. The woman he had called incompetent was now a consultant to 3 multinational companies, a sought-after speaker, and a leading figure in the fight against corporate corruption. Her former partners, who had laughed along with him when he told them about the insolent cleaning lady, now faced their own investigations based on the evidence Kesha had provided to the authorities. The exclusive golf club where they mocked employees had lost half its members due to the scandals. "Every person we underestimate carries potential we can't see," Kesha said in a final interview. Richard Sterling believed that her social status defined her intellectual capacity. That arrogance cost her freedom and her fortune. The lesson resonated far beyond the individual story. Companies began reviewing their hiring practices. Universities created inclusion programs. And young people in the inner city came to see Ka's story as proof that where you come from doesn't determine where you'll go. He tried to destroy Ka, but he ended up destroying himself. Ka learned that true revenge is not getting back at those who hurt him. It's achieving the success his enemies could never imagine. If this story of transformation and justice resonated with you, subscribe to the channel for more stories that prove that intelligence and determination always win over arrogance and prejudice. No matter how impossible victory.